because cultures have shifted and evolved, and even in the last century, boundaries have been drawn by imperial nations that have made it very complicated in certain ways to think, well, who do those works go back to?
What is the evolution of museums, in your opinion? Where are we going to be? Are we going to be visiting museums in 5 to 10 years? This episode is brought to you by EFG Hermes One, your one app for investing in more than 35 stock markets worldwide. This episode is also brought to you by Azza Fahmy Jewelry. Welcome again to What I Did Next from A&T Media. I'm Malak Fuad. Today I'm continuing my conversation with Nabila Abdel Nabi. In addition to being Senior Curator of International Art at Tate Modern, Nabila is also lead of the Hyundai Tate Research Centre, Transnational. We discuss in great detail what those roles entail. You find that you have not a free rein, but true partnerships in pushing the envelope, or is there a point where you can't go further? Because at the end of the day, we are in the UK, one of the first biggest empires, with a very entrenched hand in creating what you're trying to, in effect, change, right?
Well, I think what a lot of artists and a lot of the artists that we work with today are doing is kind of holding those systems accountable. And I think that, what's been really amazing through the center is being able to gather together and platform these artistic voices who are drawing our attention, who are reclaiming modes of practice and histories that have been, as I mentioned, marginalized or discredited. We program several events a year, and our last, let's say, symposium, although symposium doesn't quite capture the texture of our program anymore because it's so sort of multidimensional and artist-led and artist-centered. So we put on sort of performances, screenings, live projects sometimes. So we have to move away from the word symposium, I think.
The words are no longer suitable for what you're doing.
When we first started, we were very beholden to what one model of what research looks like in the museum, which we haven't moved away from entirely. We're still constantly sort of in touch with scholars and higher education institutions, but we are also very artist-centered now.
It's making me think of something, Nabila. I wonder whether the world we're in today is different to even 15 years ago, where the museum would call the shots, right? The museum was in the driving seat. I think today the artist is very much at the foreground of the change, right? Are you finding that?
I mean, museums are no longer
setting the
authoritative
rules.
structures.
Exactly.
We are in partnership with our constituents. We are accountable to our communities. And I think that's, we have, I think, decentered the process of exhibition making and programming so that it really does feel more, I hope, reciprocal. And I think that's been major for museums.
They're living beings. They're living
They are
entities.
organisms.
Exactly.
We're organisms, and they're ever evolving, and they are comprised of individuals who are actively trying to make change. And as you said, those artists who are holding those museums accountable. It's not just a question of representation, right? It's like, how do we move from representation to action? So, whenever I was working on the Middle East and North Africa Acquisitions Committee, for me, it's not like a process of aggregation. It's not just like we're going to insert these artists into an existing kind of framework. It's like, what are the works that we can bring in that will change the DNA of the museum, that will actually, challenge the very kind of paradigms and the very analytical frameworks that we use to tell art history. So, for example, there's a display, a collection display that's on right now called The Shape of Words. And it looks at a sliver of time, which is largely the 50s to the 70s. And artists across West Asia, North Africa, South Asia, Latin America, who in this period, which is largely characterized by the decolonization, so many countries were gaining independence in that moment, and you had this very interesting current kind of
Would
emerging.
you see a pattern across those places?
Yes.
Latin America and West Asia, for example, similar.
Very similar. You see something happening where artists are starting to think about creating new visual languages that are rooted in their own heritages, that are resisting the kind of languages that were imposed on them by the colonial regimes. And many of them turned to script. And they turned to script, some of them calligraphy more specifically, as a kind of basis to develop new abstract languages that were also speaking to the places in which they circulated. Many of them were, let's say, educated abroad. Many of them did come to London or Paris or other European centers, but then, went back home to Khartoum, to Cairo, to Lahore, to various spaces. And they were using script as a way to think about an abstract language that would also be a decolonizing, abstract language.
But why was it script and not imagery? In your opinion, why do you think there was this pattern across these places that they all tended towards script and the word, right?
The word. But a lot of the time, the word gets transformed into something illegible, so that actually you can read across multiple levels. It looks like it could be read, but actually you can't read it. So it's asemic, and that's really interesting to me because I think many of these artists, for example, artists in the Baghdad Modern Art Group or the One Dimension Group, were thinking about what would be read across different audiences. So what could be read across nations? I mean, we're talking about the height of Pan-Arabism as well.
Yeah, of course.
And many artists working in that vein.
I wonder if it's also a sign of protest.
Absolutely.
The script, just purely the word. Protest, yeah.
Absolutely. And it is again about thinking about their own visual heritage. What are some of the longest standing, most deep-rooted artistic forms, that they could turn to? And calligraphy and script is absolutely, one of them for many. And you see it happening in Pakistan with artists like Syed Sadiqin. You see Hamid Abdallah doing it. And Hamid Abdallah, of course, moved around. He was also at some point very much engaged with the Cobra group. I mean, it's just it's really extraordinary when you see these artists kind of moving along similar lines and not necessarily that they were connected.
But that's the beauty of ideas, how you can have a core idea spring up in different parts of the world. And it's not just in art. That's what's so incredible. It's almost like there's a synergy that's untold, right?
It's the hive mind. It's the collective unconscious.
Exactly.
I really believe in that. Artists attune us to major shifts that are happening out in the world. They perceive things that we can't.
And very often they end up producing works that obviously is produced at a certain point in time, but by the time it reaches the audience, it's completely apropos. Somehow there is that ability.
And I think this is also part of the work of collection building, because you have to have a kind of level of discernment to think what are the works that will hold over time and will continue to be important in the future, right?
Yeah. That's such a hard call, Nabila. Isn't it? I mean,
oh God, I don't want to sound like godlike.
But I mean, when I think of it as a layperson, and I'm looking at a piece of art, and I just think of it subjectively. I like it or I don't. It talks to me or it doesn't. It makes me feel something or it doesn't. But you have to. I mean, you're looking at it with different criteria. Obviously,
there's a whole matrix of factors.
Give me an idea of what that is.
I mean, we work intergenerationally, for example, in the Middle East North Africa Acquisitions Committee. So it's about, who are those figures and practices that, are so important in trying to tell a more transnational history of modernism or 20th century practice, but also always who are those urgent kind of contemporary voices that we want to platform, who are as I said, attuning us to these seismic sort of social shifts that are happening out in the world.
And Wael Shawqi is a fantastic example of that.
He really is.
He really is.
I mean, he's an extraordinary artist.
He's a fantastic example of that.
He has this capacity for world building, but a world building that is very much rooted in historical kind of retelling, which is absolutely amazing. And the Cabaret Crusades always stood out to me because the point in that work is really like, well, we have to start to tell our own histories. There's always two sides to any story.
We've talked a little bit about cultural appropriation in a sort of a roundabout way. So a country like Egypt traditionally was viewed by the outside world as not being able to house its own treasures properly. Over decades, it's been seen like that. Today, of course, we have GEM, which is a groundbreaking museum, however way you want to look at it. It's phenomenal. Will we ever see our treasures come back to us and housed and owned by us? I'm thinking about the British Museum, who's built its entire catalogue on our work. Is there a world where that happens in your thinking?
I think it is happening. I think it's starting to happen. Maybe not the British Museum per se, but I think out in the world we are seeing instances where, important works are being repatriated back. But repatriation is such a complex question, right? Because a lot of the time, one of the things that we have to contend with is because cultures have shifted and evolved, and even in the last century, boundaries have been drawn by imperial nations that have made it very complicated in certain ways to think, well, who do those works go back to? But I also think that artists, again, are pushing us to think in new ways about notions of ownership. So to take an interesting example, there's a wonderful Iraqi artist called Michael Rakowitz. And he did what's called the fourth plinth here in Trafalgar Square. And he created this lamassu, a recreation, I guess, of the lamassu, but made out of food packaging, which is very much in the vein of a whole body of work that he's been doing, called The Invisible Enemy Must Not Exist, where he's creating or re-evoking, let's say, works that were looted from the National Museum in Iraq.
In 2003, from that war.
Exactly, from that war.
So a very recent story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's an ongoing project where he is recreating many of the artworks and the objects that were looted. And then this wonderful sculpture was made as part of that. And now what Michael has done is he's decided that Tate can become the custodian of this work until a moment in which a museum in Iraq can take the work back. So we don't own the work. We are just holding on to it. And I think that is a really, really interesting provocation by an artist to challenge, our processes and protocols around acquisition, to move beyond a kind of very ownership-based model, and to think instead about being custodians and stewards of work, and to think about, trans-institutional solidarity as well.
Absolutely.
So what does it mean to hold a work safe until a time when those who it should belong to are able to take it back?
And again, it goes back to this the shift of power. Much more power is in the artist's hand now. And that is a really, really interesting change. I don't think it's ever been in the artist's hand before.
You're right that, now more than ever, artists are indeed challenging museums and challenging museum models and challenging museum ethics as well, I think.
Exactly.
And that is such a beautiful thing to also witness.
When we come back after the break, we talk about some of the paradigm shifts happening in the art world, and we also discuss how a curator like Nabila gets feedback from the audience and visitors to museums. This episode is brought to you by EFG Hermes One, your one app for investment across more than 35 stock markets worldwide. With EFG Hermes One, you can buy and sell orders in real time for immediate execution across multiple global markets. You can keep track of your favorite stocks by creating and customizing multiple watch lists, and make informed investment decisions with their advanced technical analysis tools to study market trends and investor behavior. So supercharge your financial journey and download the EFG Hermes One app on the Apple App Store and on Google Play, and start investing today. Welcome back. You're listening to part 2 of my conversation with Nabila Abdel Nabi. What are your thoughts about, does AI play a role in the art world today? I mean, I'm thinking of things like forgeries. Can you use this technology in a positive way to confirm a piece of work? Or are people a bit wary of the tool?
It's really interesting because I think AI has been, and rightly so, because of some of the implications that it's had, been viewed as this great threat. But AI as such is not a threat. It's whose hands it falls into. make it a threat, right? Whereas I think there's this perceived notion that it's going to have a totally detrimental effect on society. And in terms of art, the art ecology, I think a lot of people are very wary of it, and the implications it might have for art. But I think it presents us with a kind of radical turn in technology, somewhat in the way that photography did, where suddenly there was this idea of a kind of threat, when the process becomes automated in some way, and you lose the artist's hand. But artists became, I think, ever more creative in that moment as well.
It can unleash a completely other avenue, couldn't it?
I think so. But I'm not, I'm not naive about the real threats that it poses. Obviously, today we're seeing the implications it has on, warfare, to say the least. But I do think that there are things that can come out of this moment where AI is becoming ever more present. I mean, you have really interesting imagery that is being generated that makes you want to look back at the surrealists and really think about the kind of resonances that we're seeing today. But I don't see it becoming in any way the next thing.
No, it's not going to be the dominant force. No, I don't see it either. I don't see
that happening.
What about trends in the art world? Because a lot of industries have trends, right? You've got the fashion industry, and I'm always fascinated by this. You've got a trend that you see on the catwalk, and you'll see 5 designers coming out with the same color, for example. How do trends develop in the art world? I'm sure there are trends. Either there's, how do people decide that, an artist is really hot and everyone's trying to get him or her? How do you deal with things like that?
That's a good question. So I'm less interested in trends. I'm more interested in big questions, sort of paradigm shifts that are happening right now in ways that we couldn't have imagined, let's say, 5 years ago.
Such as?
So, for example, I worked on an exhibition that brought together 2 maybe unlikely figures.
Okay.
Hilma af Klint and Tate Mondrian. And they... both of them were kind of brought together because of their shared interest in nature, but also spirituality at the turn of the century. And I think that, the way that it resonated with visitors was really interesting, because for the longest time, nobody wanted to contend with the spiritual dimension of Mondrian's practice. And then suddenly the Hilma af Klint show came up, and the way that, visitors reacted to the show at the Guggenheim, it was the most visited exhibition that they ever had, really told us something. I think there is suddenly, we're seeing a shift, really, like a major shift in being able to talk about things that we couldn't before, that were always present, which is, the fact that a lot of art is indeed rooted in artists' different kind of spiritual inclinations.
But I also think it speaks to something else, which is that people want to be challenged. Yes. People want their own views challenged. Whenever I attend a talk, an exhibition, or whatever it might be, where I am being challenged and not being told that my ideas are reinforced, I come away much more enriched. And there is a shift towards that across a lot of different industries, I feel.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think every exhibition project is like, it should, or not that it is, but maybe should be, an exercise in modesty.
Absolutely.
Or hospitality.
Yeah.
Is how I think about it. And hospitality, not in a kind of naive sense, but rather in a real sense of kind of openness to being changed by the experience of being, of making an exhibition and putting it out in the world, and also being, visiting an exhibition. So that, at no point are the key narratives of the exhibition foreclosed from the outset by the curator. Let's say it is about posing questions.
Based on what you've just said, how do you, as someone who's putting together an exhibition, how do you get that feedback from the audience, from the visitor?
Oh, visitors are very vocal.
Well, that's what I'm curious. I mean, do you guys roam around the rooms and like listen in, or how do you do that?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, but I'm sure you must.
I'm always tempted, but no. But we also gather data, like always. The comment box. There is a range of ways.
Sure,
polls.
But you can feel when an exhibition is just like a slam dunk. You can feel it.
And people also, they take the time with this. With one of the most beautiful things is when people take the time to email you, like, out of the blue and just say like an exhibition touched them or a project touched them in some way or another, or why it didn't. People will tell you how they feel. And I think it's really important that we listen. Museums have to listen to their constituents in order to evolve in ways that continue to make them relevant institutions for the societies in which we are imbricated.
What is the evolution of museums, in your opinion? Where are we going to be? Are we going to be visiting museums in 5 to 10 years? Or will it be a completely different kind of experience?
Museums need to really take stock right now. I don't know if you've seen the latest ICOM definition of what a museum is meant to be, but my God. It's like, here's everything under the sun.
Well, anyone can call themselves a museum, right?
Well, no, it's just museums are kind of expected to kind of do everything.
Oh, I see.
Which I frankly think is impossible. And I think museums have to reckon with that and just understand what the restrictions they are working within are and be honest about those restrictions. We cannot do everything. We cannot collect everything. And so we need to think clearly what our mission is and how do we further that and how do we further our mission and our remit. It's not about growth for growth's sake, right? But I really think that museums more and more need to think about how do we speak to our local audiences and think about local and regional narratives and many of those sort of marginalized narratives and experiences that are relevant and local to them. And then try to think about the kind of global or international or transnational connections. And museums will have to move in that direction, I think, to, a model that feels more regional, that also relies more on trans-institutional solidarities. Now more than ever, we need to think about ourselves within a wider ecology of not just museums, but different, models of organizations.
Right.
And what I'd really love to see is, museums that are kind of emerging in different parts of the world. Let's say there's a lot of museums emerging right now in, West Asia, in particular in the Gulf, but also in West Africa. And I'd like to see, more grassroots-led and more imaginative sort of models without always looking to the West
Western
or
Eurocentric,
kind of models of museum making. Can we not be more imaginative and more kind of locally situated when we think about, what's an institutional model that will really speak to the cultural context in which we are located?
That's an interesting point. I also wonder whether museums always have to be physical spaces or whether we could be entering a more virtual world. And again, hence the AI element of it coming in as well. There's a potential for that, I think.
There's the AI, but again, come back to COVID.
Yeah.
Because, it's changed the world.
Of course.
And one of the things that happened was, museums had to think quite creatively about how to continue to speak to their audiences. And museums had to reevaluate their models of distribution. So many moved to screenings online and screenings in partnership with other museums around the world. And again, that kind of coming together and pooling of resources and pooling of research and ideas, I think is going to continue to be the way forward. So really to think about a more interconnected model of working.
I want to talk about something that I witness as a sort of an attendee of art fairs. And I'm a lay person. I'm not from the art world, but I do like art, and I do like to go and see go to a fair where I can see a huge amount of different options. The art world, as someone from the outside, comes across to someone like me as so superficial. Although I know it's not, but when you go to these fairs and you see everyone interacting with each other and everyone sort of more conscious of how they look in what they're dressed and how they appear to their peers. And it's almost like the art is irrelevant at the fair. And I wonder whether you think we've reached peak fair. We've got fair. Frieze has locations all over the place. Art Basel is everywhere. Have we reached a point where there's a saturation happening here?
I can not every fair is the same.
Yeah.
I
That's
think
true.
just to try to be gentle to
No,
some
I know,
of
and
the fairs,
maybe I'm
but
being
I
a bit
hear you
harsh.
completely. No, I
But
hear
I
you
just feel that
absolutely.
it's overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
It's overwhelming when you go to these fairs and you don't even know where to go.
It's overwhelming, and very often you just don't get to see the art.
No.
I mean, let's be real. And
you and I met at Frieze in last October, and we had to.
It's exhausting.
It was exhausting. To find a table to have our little sandwich was insane.
But also, it's just like, there is a real thing, even for someone like me who,
from this
lives
world.
and breathes.
Yeah.
There is a real thing like fatigue, art fatigue that just you hit that point quite early in a fair. But there are different models.
Yes.
And there are ways of doing things differently that are maybe more generous towards the viewing of art.
Right.
And that take into consideration the very human experience of wandering through an art fair. So maybe to take one recent example, there's Art Basel that happened in Qatar, where Wael Shawi was the director.
Yes.
And his proposition was actually to have solo booths of artists. So it's not like a mishmash of different artists, and you're not showing one work by each artist that you present. It was actually solo booths, so you could actually take the time to get to know the artist's practice in a, I would say, much more generous way. And it's just a slower pace. It was fewer galleries, and so you just that's a different way of going about
a little bit.
an art fair, maybe. But there's also Art Dubai.
Yes.
For example, which every year they have, the Global Art Forum, which is the kind of discursive programming that happens alongside the fair, where actually, year on year, they surface some really important questions and timely questions and art histories that for the longest time have not really been engaged with. So they usually have like a regional focus as well, and they invite really wonderful curators every year. And again, I think that is where the commercial model can also meet like a much more, let's say, critical
and more depth.
Exactly. And research sort of based experience.
Nabila, thank you so much.
Thank you, Malak. Thank you.
I really enjoyed that conversation.
It was wonderful.
Yeah,
thank you.
It got me thinking about art in a different way, and museums, and how they need to evolve and they need to change, and for them to stay relevant.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you're involved in that.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me today. I'm Malak Fuad, and this episode was produced by Chirag Desai. Remember that you can leave us your comments on any of our social media platforms, as well as our podcast platforms and on our website. See you again really soon.